What's up, guys? Here we are with my brother's 99 Honda Integra. In the last video, I installed this AEM fuel rail with the 1000cc Bosch injectors. It also came with the adapters for the harness. This is a B20 turbo motor. We're just picked it up turboed, had a cracked water pump. The car sat for about 3 years under the previous owner's possession. So I picked it up, put a water pump on it, and I'm just looking to get this car tuned properly from my brother. And we're just giving it the supporting mods it needs to run this turbo safely that I feel it needs. So I'm upgrading his fuel system completely on the car. I'm giving him the gauges he needs. We're gonna be installing the air and fuel AEM gauge and an AEM boost gauge on this thing today as well on this video. So this is the car here. Has a custom paint job. We all run this sticker in memory of my friend Brian Dewey. He passed away of cancer at the age of 21, and he was a car enthusiast like we are. So we all run a sticker in memory of him. Alright guys, we're gonna get into this, and I'm gonna try to break it down for some of you out there that might be thinking about running these gauges. This is the way I'm gonna do it. If you feel I didn't do something the right way or the correct way, leave a comment, leave your input, and I'll see if I can't do anything better in the future. So, haven't tore apart too much here. What I've done is I've taken away this 10 here for this panel. I'm not sure yet if I'm gonna have to remove it or not, but I took that off just in case I do. I'm gonna be installing the gauges on either side of this cluster. My brother got a custom bezel that allows us to do that. So I'm gonna be removing this here. In order to do that, there's 2 Phillips, and I undid those, and then this just pulls away like so. And I'm gonna be running my wires through there somehow. But if you're putting them in the pillar, you just gotta figure out how to run your wires neatly through here and behind the dash. And then we're just gonna be looking to tap into power and ground to power the gauges, and you're gonna have to run your wires through the firewall for the O2 sensor for the AFR gauge. And you just got to find a grommet, a factory grommet. This is one I've used in the past. See that grommet right there? So what I do is I poke a hole, and then I poke the wires through there, so then the grommet sits back in the firewall like it needs to, and it's still sealing up. And I tap my O2 sensor down in my exhaust. So I'm gonna get my gauges and that new bezel in place, and then I'll show you guys what wires I'll be tapping into down under the dash. Alright guys, these are the gauges we're gonna be installing in this custom gauge pod my brother bought for the Integra. We bought these through a website called DA Performance. They're AEM gauges. These are a little more on the pricier side, but they're definitely worth it. We got air and fuel, like I said, and here's the boost gauge. So I'm gonna get these unboxed and I'm gonna set them in place in this bezel. Then I'm gonna figure out the best way to route the wires neatly in the location that I'm gonna be working with. And you just gotta do the same process wherever you wanna place the gauge in the car. You just gotta figure out where you wanna run the power and ground wire to, and then you just gotta hide away the access wires to the gauges. So once I get mine set in the bezel, I will pick up my video and I will show you guys where I'm tapping in to give those wires power and ground. Alright guys, I got the gauges in the bezel, got the connections to the back of them. I'm gonna go ahead and start putting this in the car. Looks pretty nice. Alright guys, so I wanted to show you guys the easiest way I found to run the wires for the gauges. I fed them through the underside for the boost gauge. They're coming along the side of the cluster through a hole that was already previously there. On the air and fuel gauge, I undid the cluster. This one's coming from the back side. This one is feeding under here through another hole that's already been cut out from factory. I'm gonna put the gauge pod in place, hook up my connections in back of those gauges, and then I'll move to down here and organize these wires and show you where I'm going to tap in for power and ground for these gauges. I got the gauge pod in place with the gauges. They're connected in the back. One thing I did notice off the bat, so be mindful of this if you do want to run these gauges, is these like pods that house the gauge. They cover the temperature gauge and the fuel gauge, so you can't fully see what your reading actually is on those gauge. But the good thing about it is you can see the hot side on the temperature and you can see the low fuel on the gauge. So that's, I guess, one good thing about it. I'm gonna move to the bottom and get these wires out of the way neatly, and then tap into power and ground. Alright guys, I'm gonna show you guys how I put power and ground to these gauges. I'll show you guys here that they're powering up here. Right now the air and fuel is just going to read atmospheric pressure because I do not have the sensor in the exhaust yet. But you guys can see here that they're powering on. So what I did is I took both the power wires to both the gauges and I tapped them into the cigarette power wire. And I took both the ground wires to those gauges, put them together, and put them to the ground wire going to the cigarette lighter as well. So now I got my power and ground, the blue and the white wire. Like I said, the white one on the air and fuel gauge is for tuning purposes. I'm not sure what it is on the boost gauge. So I'm gonna continue on, put this back in place here, put both the Phillips I ended up taking off from in here. There's two Phillips. You remove the ashtray, there's two Phillips back here, and this whole assembly will pop out. So I'm gonna get this bolted up and back in place, and then I'm gonna continue running the rest of the wire for my O2 sensor and for my boost gauge pressure sensor. Those are gonna go through the grommet and into the engine bay, and we will be done in here. Alright guys, this is where I'm gonna call it a day. Car sits so low I can't get the O2 sensor, the new one, installed on the downpipe. So this connection here is gonna hang out here for now. This is for the boost gauge. I gotta get a vacuum line and a T and tap this in somewhere off my intake manifold, off a vacuum line. So we'll let that hang out there, but gauges are installed. They have power and ground. These wires here go to my fan switch, something I gotta take care of and make look more neatly. That's one of the wires that I have to zip tie and get and put up out of the way. Those wires there are just for my ECU, but yeah, it looks really good. Leave comments, subscribe. Thank you for checking out the channel. Videos on the caliber here soon.